The title of this tutorial is the SPOHP Metadata Processing Pathway, how to make oral history interviews ready for the UFDC. At the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, SPOHP for short, we often quote the historian Valerie Yao, who defines oral history by three key components. First, we have the recording of the interview. Second, we also have a transcript of the recording. And a third defining component is the methodology, the art and craft of good oral history research. This video is about a fourth key component that defines oral history: metadata processing. Metadata is the information about the interview. If you're working alone with just a few interviews, metadata processing requires very little effort. But if you're working as a team on a large number of interviews, good metadata processing requires a systematic team effort. Metadata is information about information. For SPOHP, this includes many different types, such as the correct spelling of the narrator's name, the interviewer's name, the date and location, the interviewer's field notes, summary, keywords about the content of the interview, the length or size and format of the media files, such as PDFs, MP3s, MP4s, photos, or even 3D scans of artifacts. Metadata also includes information about Creative Commons release forms and whether they've been signed and where they are filed. Metadata processing includes all the challenges of team communication as each member tracks where all those bits of information are archived during the stages of transcription and audio optimization as an interview makes its way through the pathway to publication. So really, metadata processing is an aspect of oral history that makes it possible to share oral histories with the public. Here we have the new version of the University of Florida Digital Collections website showing the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program's collections. We also have an older version, which some people think is easier to navigate. By streamlining the metadata process, historians increase not only the speed of publication, they also increase the accuracy of the information they share with the public. So this video tells the story of how an interview goes to the UFDC, the University of Florida Digital Collections. It's an online repository managed by the university library system. It's a summary. This video is a summary of how we currently process batches of oral history media files, making them ready for the university librarians. When we refer to batches, we are talking about a group of interviews. It could be anywhere from 1 to maybe 1,000 or more interviews. The size is really determined by what happens to be ready for processing. This diagram illustrates the steps involved in metadata processing. And we'll be focusing on the steps shown here, but if we scroll to the left, you can see that metadata collecting really begins before the interview, as the interviewer is preparing for research and planning to record the metadata. So if we scroll back, Research preparation is preparing not only to conduct the interview, it's preparing to collect metadata. And the steps for preparation are not shown here, but you can go to the Samuel Proctor Oral History website. We have a whole page on preparing an oral history research project. It's very user-friendly, and everything you need to know about getting started, you can find right here. So once an oral history interview is done and the recorder is turned off, three main things happen right away. The media goes to the shared drive. The Creative Commons form is digitized and stored in the shared drive. If it's an interview with a military veteran, there's an additional release form for the Library of Congress. The third thing that an interviewer does after an interview is they enter their metadata into a new submission portal. So you've gotten home from your field work, you open your laptop, you take out your Creative Commons release forms, and you enter in your summary of the interview, where the media file can be located. You check off the keywords from the interview. 5 is typically plenty. You'll put your name, your role, the collection if you know it, where the Creative Commons release form can be found, date of the interview. All of this information is metadata. The metadata that from this form all goes to a spreadsheet. And you can see over the years, people who have submitted their new interviews into the form, their metadata is collected here. So all that metadata is entered here. And as the audio file is being optimized and formatted, and as the transcript is being prepared, the metadata is making its way forward into what we call a batch. Batches are groups of interviews. If you are going to begin processing a batch, you'll find them in the archive drive. So here is a list of batches that have been completed in the last couple of years. And here are the batches that are waiting to be processed. Each batch contains several items that each batch contains several items, and well, that one's empty. Each batch contains several items. Those items are the list of interviews. Well, that one's empty too. Each batch is a folder with several items. Each of these in this case, these are transcripts. Each of these transcripts will have to be listed in Airtable. Airtable is a very friendly spreadsheet. It's an interface between the team at SPOHP and the libraries team. So for each batch, and so here, well, these aren't filtered. I can filter it by the batch name. So once you've entered your batch list into Airtable, you'll want to be able to filter it. So in this case, and the filter will go in the column here, folder to UFDC. So we have the name of the items, which you saw in the archive drive. They've been entered here under SPOHP ID. And when I say filter, you can see down here, there's 354 records in this particular sheet in Airtable. But if we filter it by the batch name, then we have 62 records. So working one batch at a time, you'll want to add the title of the interview. If it's not, sometimes it's not an interview. Sometimes it will be a public presentation or a talk, a recording of a public event, and those titles will differ. So for each item, you'll want to enter the narrator's name. We call it an interviewee. The interviewer's names, material type, format, the length of the media file, the language it's in, the genre, keywords. And a note about keywords, you'll notice here, keyword is murder. This is the collection, families impacted by police violence. The subject authority is fast. And you'll notice here, this is the collection name, the Impacted Families National March on Washington Oral History Project. Its subject authority is local. So the opposite of fast is not slow, it's local. What we mean by fast, a fast keyword is a universally recognized keyword. So if I type in murder, you'll see this is a universally recognized keyword. If I type in, what was the other one? The name of the collection. I go to fast. Nothing comes up. That's how you know its subject authority is local. There's other sources for keyword subject authorities, and I can show you that later. So all of this metadata, ideally, again, it comes from the portal, From the portal, it gets entered to the spreadsheet. From the spreadsheet, it gets manually entered into Airtable. And there's different kinds of batches. So here's the original Airtable sheet we were working in. You can see down here, there's 3,180 records. But to give you an example of different types of batches, I can filter. Then we have 107 records in this batch. These happen to be PDFs. Most of them happen to be PDFs. And you'll see here, these already have a bib ID. So what that means is the librarians at the UFDC have already uploaded probably the audio file, could be the video file. So it's already recorded at the UFDC, and when these transcripts were uploaded, they were added to an existing record. So if it's an existing record, it will have a bib ID. If it's a new record, it won't have one yet. You can see here in our process. So I showed you the batches in the archive drive, the folders. I'll show you again. Here we have a batch. The next step is the metadata that was in Airtable that we just showed you. So here, once everything is entered into Airtable and the metadata is reviewed and double checked, the batch gets submitted to the librarians. And that happens through another portal. So in this portal, you enter the batch name, folder to UFDC name, the filter, the number of interviews, the file types. And here, under the goal of this batch, this is what tells the librarians if these are new records or old records. If we're adding to an existing record, if we're adding a PDF transcript or an audio or video recording, or if we're creating a new record, and it can be a mix. A batch can be mixed. So once it's submitted, once SPOHP submits it to the UFDC, the librarians team and all of their steps are not represented here. This is just to show what happens, give you a general idea of what happens behind the scenes. Once SPOHP submits a batch to UFDC through this portal, this data goes to another spreadsheet. And the team of librarians double checks to see if it's already on UFDC. And they will update the Airtable spreadsheet as well. So for example, if it's a new record and a new record is added to UFDC, it's assigned a bib ID number, and that gets added to Airtable here after the batch has been processed for future reference. And one note about the legacy records, if we go back to the beginning, you can see this process typically starts with new interview media files. But because SPOHP has been around for many decades, there are interviews in our collections that have not been transcribed yet, interviews where the transcript has been put up on the UFDC, but the audio has not, or just the opposite, where the audio is on UFDC, but the transcript has not. Those require a little bit of a different process when it comes to metadata processing, because the sources of metadata are different. Sources of metadata ideally will be the portal spreadsheet. So after the interviewer enters all their metadata in this Google form, ideally everything will be here, but it's never always there. There's always something missing, it seems. So, but there's many sources for metadata. We have a YouTube channel. Deborah Hendricks has thousands of videos here. And each video, you can play it, and you'll see right at the beginning of each video, we have the metadata. So here's your SPOHP ID number. Here's your collection. And typically down here, we have more information. Sometimes there's even a summary or an abstract that can be entered into Airtable. Other sources of metadata, you can go to the actual PDF and get the abstract, the creator names, the dates. You can find correct, typically the most reliable source for the correct spelling of someone's name is on the Creative Commons form, where they have written their own name themselves. So throughout this process of working between batches and in Airtable and checking sources of metadata, you'll always want to be on the lookout for discrepancies in the date of the interview, how names are spelled, and you'll want to make a note of any mistakes you find and any corrections you make, because corrections to individual items, that's this step here, that's an ongoing process. And the team of librarians has done an amazing job the last couple of years, especially going through and ensuring consistency. But that's an integral part of this whole process. So once you have completed all your metadata fields and you've double checked it and you've made a note of anything that seems to be a problem, and you've entered the abstract or fieldwork summary, once you're sure it's as complete as you can possibly get it, then you submit the batch to the UFDC. At that point, the team of librarians may have questions about individual items. But if not, it will end up on the UFDC. I hope this has been a helpful tutorial. And I hope you have a great day.